The words came out of Bing Crosby's mouth like a casual observation, as if he were commenting on the weather or the quality of the coffee. But to Dean Martin, standing in that NBC hallway in the spring of 1950, they felt like a knife sliding between his ribs. "You're a comedian who sings, Dean, not a singer. There's a difference." Bing adjusted his pipe, that famous pipe that was as much a part of his image as his smooth baritone voice. "You've got charm, I'll give you that. And the drunk act is funny. But a real crooner? No. You'll never be that. The voice isn't there. The technique isn't there. You're entertainment, not art." Dean stood frozen in that hallway, his face arranged in the easy smile that had become his trademark, the smile that said nothing bothered him. Nothing got under his skin. Nothing could touch the king of cool. But inside, something cracked. Something that would take 15 years to heal. "Thanks for the advice, Bing," Dean said, his voice steady. "I'll keep that in mind." Bing nodded, already walking away, already forgetting the conversation that would haunt Dean Martin for the next decade and a half. To Bing Crosby, it was just an honest assessment from one professional to another. To Dean Martin, it was a verdict, a sentence, a declaration that no matter how hard he worked, no matter how many records he sold, he would never be considered a real singer by the people who mattered. And in 1950, nobody mattered more than Bing Crosby. To understand the weight of Bing Crosby's words, you have to understand who Bing Crosby was in 1950. He wasn't just a singer, he was the singer. The biggest recording artist in history. The man who had sold more records than anyone who had ever lived. His voice had defined American popular music for 2 decades. When people thought of a crooner, they thought of Bing Crosby. Everyone else was just an imitation. And Dean Martin? In 1950, Dean Martin was the funny half of Martin and Lewis. He was the straight man to Jerry Lewis's manic energy. He was the guy who sang a few songs between comedy bits, the handsome Italian with the lazy smile who made everything look easy. Nobody took him seriously as a singer. How could they? He was standing next to Jerry Lewis, falling down, getting pies thrown in his face, playing the fool. Dean had always dreamed of being a singer, a real singer. Growing up in Steubenville, Ohio, he had listened to Bing Crosby on the radio and imagined himself with that kind of voice, that kind of respect, that kind of legacy. He had started his career as a singer in local clubs, crooning Italian ballads and American standards, hoping someone would notice. And people had noticed, but not for his singing. They noticed the charm, the looks, the effortless cool. They noticed everything except the voice. When he teamed up with Jerry Lewis in 1946, it was supposed to be temporary, a way to pay the bills until his singing career took off. But Martin and Lewis became a phenomenon, and suddenly Dean was trapped. Every time he tried to release a serious record, it was overshadowed by the comedy. Every time he tried to be taken seriously as a vocalist, someone would make a joke about Jerry Lewis. He was stuck in a box that he had never wanted to be in, and Bing Crosby's words confirmed his worst fear. Maybe the box was where he belonged. The months after that hallway conversation were difficult. Dean went through the motions, performing with Jerry, recording songs that nobody bought, smiling for the cameras while something inside him slowly died. He started drinking more. Not the fake drinking he did on stage, but real drinking, the kind that numbed the disappointment and made the voice in his head, Bing Crosby's voice, a little quieter. His wife Betty noticed the change. "What's wrong with you?" she asked one night. "You've been different lately, distant." "Nothing's wrong. I'm fine." "You're not fine. You haven't been fine since that thing at NBC. What happened?" Dean couldn't tell her. He couldn't admit that a few casual words from Bing Crosby had shattered something inside him. It was too embarrassing. Too weak. Dean Martin wasn't supposed to care what people thought. Dean Martin wasn't supposed to let anything get to him. That was the whole act. That was the whole point. But the truth was, Dean Martin cared desperately. He cared more than anyone knew. Behind the lazy smile and the easy charm was a man who wanted nothing more than to be respected for his voice. And Bing Crosby, the king of all crooners, had told him it would never happen. Years passed. Martin and Lewis broke up in 1956, a painful public split that everyone predicted would be the end of Dean Martin. "Without Jerry, he's nothing," the columnists wrote. "He's just a singer, and not a very good one at that." The words echoed Bing's assessment. Just a singer, not a very good one. But something had changed in Dean. The breakup with Jerry, as painful as it was, had freed him. For the first time in 10 years, he could focus on what he really wanted, proving Bing Crosby wrong. He threw himself into his solo career with a determination that surprised everyone who knew him. He took voice lessons, something he had always been too proud to do before. He studied the great singers, not just Bing but Sinatra and Tony Bennett and Nat King Cole. He worked on his phrasing, his breath control, his emotional delivery. He stopped trying to be Bing Crosby and started trying to be Dean Martin. The real Dean Martin. The singer he had always known he could be. The results were slow but steady. His acting career took off. The Young Lions. Some Came Running. Rio Bravo. People started to see him differently. Not as the funny half of a comedy duo, but as a legitimate star. A leading man. An artist. But the singing? The singing was still in Bing's shadow. Every time Dean released a record, the critics compared him to Crosby. And every time the comparison was not favorable. Pleasant but lightweight. Entertaining but not memorable. He's no Bing Crosby. Those 3 words followed Dean Martin like a curse. He's no Bing Crosby. He's no Bing Crosby. He's no Bing Crosby. Dean never forgot the hallway conversation. He never forgot the casual cruelty of Bing's assessment. And he never stopped working to prove him wrong. In 1962, Dean signed with Reprise Records, Frank Sinatra's label. It was a new start, a chance to reinvent himself yet again. He recorded album after album, searching for the song that would finally break through, finally prove to the world, and to Bing Crosby, that Dean Martin was a real singer. The song came in the spring of 1964. Everybody Loves Somebody had been written in 1947, the same year Dean Martin started his career. It had been recorded before, by other artists, without much success. But when Dean's arranger Ernie Freeman presented him with a new arrangement, something clicked. Dean listened to the demo and felt something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. "This is it," he told his producer. "This is the one." They recorded it in a single take. Dean's voice was warm, intimate, effortless. Everything Bing had said it could never be. When the playback finished, there was silence in the studio. Then someone started clapping. Then everyone was clapping. They knew. They all knew. This was something special. The single was released on June 15, 1964. At first, it performed modestly. Good reviews, decent sales, nothing spectacular. Dean had been through this before. He didn't get his hopes up. But then something happened. The song started climbing the charts. Week after week, it rose higher. Number 20, number 15, number 10, number 5. People were buying it. Radio stations were playing it. Something was happening that hadn't happened to a Dean Martin single in years. On August 15, 1964, exactly 2 months after its release, Everybody Loves Somebody reached number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100. It knocked A Hard Day's Night by the Beatles off the top spot. The Beatles, the biggest band in the world, the phenomenon that was reshaping popular music. And Dean Martin, the comedian who sang, the entertainer who would never be a real crooner, had knocked them off the charts. The news spread through Hollywood like wildfire. Dean Martin had beaten the Beatles. The 47-year-old crooner had topped the 20-something British invasion. It was unthinkable. It was impossible. It was the biggest story in music. Dean Martin sat in his living room, holding the Billboard chart, staring at his name at the top. Number 1. After 15 years of being told he wasn't good enough, he was number 1. His wife Jean found him there, tears streaming down his face. She had never seen him cry before. Not once in all the years she had known him. "Dean, what's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong." He wiped his eyes, embarrassed. Everything's right. For the first time in 15 years, everything's right. That night, Dean Martin made a phone call. He had waited 15 years for this moment. 15 years of doubt and determination, of criticism and perseverance. Now it was time. The phone rang 3 times before Bing Crosby answered. Hello? Bing, it's Dean Martin. There was a pause. Dean could imagine Bing's face, the confusion, the mild surprise. They hadn't spoken in years. They moved in the same circles but had never been close. Just 2 singers who had once shared a hallway and a conversation that changed one of their lives. Dean, what a surprise. What can I do for you? Dean took a breath. He had rehearsed this moment 1,000 times in his head. The triumphant declaration, the cutting remark, the revenge that would taste as sweet as the #1 single on the charts. But now that the moment was here, the words didn't come. Something else came instead. I just wanted to thank you, Bing. Another pause. Longer this time. Thank me? For what? For what you said to me in that hallway at NBC, back in 1950. Do you remember? Bing was quiet. Dean could hear him thinking, searching his memory. I'm not sure You told me I was a comedian who sings, not a singer. You said I'd never be a real crooner. Silence. Did I say that? You did. Dean, I don't remember saying that. But if I did, I apologize. That was a terrible thing to say. Dean laughed. It wasn't a bitter laugh. It was the easy, genuine laugh of a man who had made peace with something that had haunted him for years. Don't apologize, Bing. That's not why I'm calling. I'm calling to thank you. Because those words drove me for 15 years. Every time I wanted to give up, every time the critic said I wasn't good enough, I heard your voice in my head. And I thought, I'm going to prove him wrong. I'm going to show him. Dean paused, looking at the Billboard chart still clutched in his hand. Today, my single hit #1. It knocked the Beatles off the top of the charts. And the first person I wanted to tell was you. Because you're the reason I never stopped trying. You're the reason I'm here. Bing Crosby was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was different. Softer. The arrogance that Dean remembered from that hallway was gone, replaced by something that sounded almost like humility. Dean, I want to tell you something. I've been listening to your records these past few years, and I was wrong. I was completely wrong. You're not a comedian who sings. You're a singer, a real singer, one of the best I've ever heard. Now it was Dean's turn to be silent. I mean it, Bing continued. That song, Everybody Loves Somebody, it's beautiful. The phrasing, the emotion, the warmth in your voice. It's everything I said you didn't have. And you have it. You've always had it. I was just too blind to see it. Dean felt something loosen in his chest. A knot that had been there for 15 years finally coming undone. Bing, I don't know what to say. Don't say anything. Just accept my apology and my congratulations. You did it, Dean. You proved me wrong, and I couldn't be happier about it. They talked for another hour that night. Not about music or competition or who was better than whom. Just 2 men, 2 singers, sharing stories about the business they loved and the price they had paid to succeed in it. By the time they hung up, something had changed between them. The rivalry, if it had ever really been a rivalry, was over. In its place was something that felt almost like friendship. Over the next few years, Dean Martin and Bing Crosby crossed paths several times. At industry events, at recording studios, at the occasional Hollywood party. Each time there was warmth between them, a nod of mutual respect, an acknowledgement of what they had both achieved. In 1970, Bing Crosby appeared on The Dean Martin Show. It was a surprise to everyone in the industry. Bing rarely did television, and when he did, it was always his own specials, carefully controlled and produced. But he had specifically asked to be on Dean's show. No conditions, no special treatment. Just a guest spot, like any other singer. They performed together that night. 2 crooners, 2 generations, 2 voices blending in harmony. The audience gave them a standing ovation. But the real moment came after the cameras stopped rolling. Backstage, Bing pulled Dean aside. He was older now, his face lined with age, his famous voice showing the first signs of wear. But his eyes were clear and kind. "I want to tell you something," Bing said. "Something I should have told you 20 years ago." Dean waited. "You're not just a real singer, Dean. You're one of the greats. When they write the history of American popular music, your name will be right there alongside mine, alongside Frank's, alongside anyone who ever stood in front of a microphone and made people feel something. I'm proud to have shared an era with you." Dean didn't know what to say. For 15 years he had dreamed of hearing these words, and now that he was hearing them, they meant more than he had ever imagined. "Thank you, Bing. That means everything to me." Bing smiled. "I know it does. That's why I said it." They shook hands. It was the last time they would ever speak privately. Bing Crosby died on October 14, 1977, on a golf course in Spain. He had just finished a round with friends and was walking toward the clubhouse when his heart gave out. He was 74 years old. Dean Martin heard the news that afternoon. He was at home watching television when the bulletin interrupted the program. Bing Crosby, the voice of a generation, was gone. Dean turned off the television and sat in silence for a long time. He thought about that hallway at NBC. He thought about the words that had driven him for 15 years. He thought about the phone call after Everybody Loves Somebody and the appearance on his show and the handshake backstage. He thought about what Bing had said. "When they write the history of American popular music, your name will be right there alongside mine." Dean picked up the phone and called his daughter Dina. "I just heard about Bing. Are you okay, Dad?" "I'm okay. I just wanted to talk." "What do you want to talk about?" Dean was quiet for a moment. Then he said something that surprised her. "I want to talk about forgiveness. About how the people who hurt us the most sometimes turn out to be the people who help us the most. About how the things we think are curses turn out to be blessings." "What do you mean?" "Bing Crosby told me once that I'd never be a real singer. It was the cruelest thing anyone ever said to me. It broke something inside me. But it also built something. It gave me something to fight for, something to prove. Without those words, I might have given up. I might have stayed a comedian who sings. But because of Bing, I became a singer. A real singer." He paused. And then, years later, he apologized. He told me I was one of the greats. He gave me something I didn't even know I needed. His respect, his acknowledgement, his blessing. Dina was quiet on the other end of the line. "So I'm not sad today," Dean continued. "I'm grateful. Grateful that Bing Crosby was part of my life. Grateful that he hurt me and then healed me. Grateful that he gave me something to fight for and then told me I had won." "That's a beautiful way to think about it, Dad." "It's the only way to think about it. Life's too short for grudges. And revenge isn't really revenge anyway. It's just motivation dressed up in anger. The real victory isn't beating the person who doubted you. The real victory is becoming the person they said you could never be, and then thanking them for it." Dean Martin lived for another 18 years after Bing Crosby's death. He continued to perform, to record, to make people laugh and cry and feel. And every time he sang Everybody Loves Somebody, he thought about that hallway at NBC, those cruel words, and the 15-year journey that turned them into a blessing. At Dean Martin's funeral in 1995, one of the speakers told the story of Dean and Bing. The insult, the determination, the triumph, the reconciliation. The audience listened in silence, many of them hearing it for the first time. The speaker concluded with words that Dean himself had said many years ago when asked about his relationship with Bing Crosby. "Bing told me I'd never be a real singer. He was wrong. But here's the thing. Being wrong was the best thing he ever did for me. Because the moment he said I couldn't do it was the moment I decided I would. And I did. Not to prove him wrong. To prove myself right. There's a difference. Revenge is about them. Success is about you. I chose success. And I owe Bing Crosby for giving me the motivation to choose it." The speaker paused, letting the words settle over the audience. Dean Martin beat the Beatles. He knocked them off the #1 spot. And the first call he made wasn't to the press. It wasn't to his manager. It wasn't even to his wife. It was to Bing Crosby, the man who said he couldn't do it, the man who 15 years later admitted he was wrong. That's not revenge. That's something better. That's grace. That's redemption. That's Dean Martin. And somewhere, perhaps, two voices are singing together again. Two crooners from different eras, different styles, different lives. One who doubted, one who proved. Both, in the end, grateful for each other. Because the greatest songs aren't about competition. They're about connection. And Everybody Loves Somebody was never about beating the Beatles or proving Bing Crosby wrong. It was about a man who refused to give up on his dream, even when the people he admired most told him it was impossible. That's not revenge. That's love. And that's Dean Martin.